How's it going, y'all? And welcome back to this Advanced Climber series. If there are any specific points where you think that is cool, I'd like to hear more about it, I'd like an entire video on that, let me know down in the comments. I'm planning on making a lot of individual videos out of these points. Just for the Advanced series alone, I think I'm going to have something like 90 points. If you don't want to wait multiple years for something to show up as a full-length video, let me know. And also that just helps me, frankly, so that I know what y'all want to see and I can prioritize it. So without delaying, I'll go ahead and get started. Number 39. What weaknesses are worth improving? There are a million weaknesses that all of us could be fixing, but we all have limited time and we have limited energy. So it's important that we pay attention to what we actually need to focus on. Also, not all weaknesses really matter. Like some are going to be holding you back much more than others will. It's important that we figure out which ones should we actually be spending time on and which ones should we just kind of kick the can down the road on for a while. Earlier on in this advanced series, I talked about how there are these common threads that link together a lot of climbing. And there are a lot of things that we may think, oh, I've got these 12 different weaknesses and it may almost feel overwhelming. But in reality, it might actually just be 2 or 3 different things that are manifesting in different ways. So step 1 when trying to figure out, is this a weakness worth improving, is how big picture of an item is this? If it is, you don't know how to twist, you don't know how to use momentum, you climb really slowly, these big overarching problems, that's the kind of thing we want to take care of as soon as possible, because its reach across the rest of our climbing will be significant. The next thing to consider here is just how bad are you at this thing? With some weaknesses, it's like, oh, my hands aren't strong enough. And it's like, yeah, your hands will never be strong enough. Unfortunately, that's just a fact of rock climbing. But are your hands really that much of a weakness, or could they just be stronger? As an advanced climber, you can no longer be terrible at things. Like, it's just so much more punishing and it will hold you back far more than you realize. So figure out, are you just really bad at some of these things? Because if you are, the initial learning curve with anything is massive. A weakness may not be a huge deal in your climbing, like this certain particular thing, but if you're just awful at it, go ahead and fix it, because it's not going to take much time or energy to take care of because you're so bad at it. The next clue to think about with, is this weakness worth fixing, is, have you known about this for years? Have your climbing partners been telling you this has been a problem consistently for multiple years? If so, that is a big enough sign that it's a problem. You may not think it's a problem. You're like, hey, it's fine. It's not like my biggest issue. But if it's something that keeps cropping up year after year, season after season, yeah, go ahead and take care of it. Because the last thing you want to do is wait another couple years. And then you finally address it, and suddenly you realize, oh, that actually had a significant impact in my climbing. What have I been doing? Why have I not taken care of this yet? The last point that's worth keeping in mind for, is this weakness worth working on, is how much time and energy are you going to have to put into it to fix it? If it's a really big issue, it might be worth putting in a ton of time to fix it. That's okay, and that's something that you're probably going to have to do multiple times throughout your climbing career. But there are several things, and hangboarding is a good example. Honestly, you can hangboard for 20 minutes twice a week with a very simple protocol that you don't have to change, honestly, but every 3 to 6 months. And that's going to give you good results for finger training and finger strength. So that's great. Yeah, 40 minutes a week. Honestly, you could even do shorter than that. With things like that, that's so easy to plug in. So even if fingers aren't the biggest weakness, you can take care of them with a pretty small and consistent amount of input. So those are some ways you can kind of think about approaching weaknesses and deciding, where's the juice really worth the squeeze? Number 40, beware the Frankenstein approach. The more advanced we get in climbing, the more we start to notice these little like kind of odd things that seem to hold us back. Really small. It's like, oh, well, if I can just toe in and like twist, if I was stronger at that, with a really extended wide foot, then I'd be stronger. So I'm going to work this muscle inside my leg to do that. Or, if I could lock off out here better, that would really help my climbing. So I'm going to do this exercise that just trains this one muscle on the back of my shoulder. And we start really diving into the minutia. While these isolation exercises and these little accessories can be really helpful for climbing, and they can be a nice cherry on top to good training, if you don't handle the fundamentals first, absolutely nail down the basics, and instead you prioritize these little things, then you're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. In the world of strength and conditioning, these exercises are normally referred to as accessories or supplemental lifts. I kind of want to highlight that second word, supplemental, because it defines what these are really well. Imagine if you ate a diet that was mostly just eating multivitamins, supplements, and then you kind of ate some normal food on the side. That wouldn't be very good. Like, that would not be fueling like an athlete. You wouldn't be preparing yourself and your body for good training and good performance. That would be silly. No one does that. But with training, and especially as climbers, we can fall into this trap of just eating supplements, essentially. Like, we want to do these little isolation exercises and do these little things that feel so hyper specialized to the one thing we think we need, and we do it instead of these big picture exercises, these more all-encompassing strength movements or exercises on the wall even, that will check a lot more boxes and make us a more well-rounded athlete. Without that foundation of strength and athleticism, these little supplemental exercises won't make that much of a change. If you've been finding these tips helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button down below. Number 41, train for where you are, not for where you want to be. One big issue that advanced climbers run into is that they want to make these giant breakthroughs. They want to break out to 2 or 3 grades ahead of where they are right now. And what that ends up doing is it makes them just make a lot of dumb decisions. They stop looking at, okay, I'm a V10 climber. Here's how V10 climbers should train. I should build a pyramid around this. Instead they say, well, what's this V13 climber doing over here? And all of the training and preparation that got you here, that may have gotten you here really well, it's so common for advanced climbers to throw that away and think, okay, I'm advanced now. I need to start doing more extreme things, rather than just saying, all right, here's who I am. Here's where I'm at. What are the things that can just move me forward a little bit? Not a huge jump, not a massive breakthrough. You're at the point in your climbing to where the fastest way to progress is consistency, and it's nailing down the basics, and it's just meeting yourself where you're at right now. This is really easy to spot in lower level climbers. If you saw a V3 climber on the campus board, you'd immediately be like, hey, hold on, let's pump the brakes. There's a million ways to get better that aren't this. This is kind of a road to disaster for you. And we can so obviously see that for lower level climbers, but we're really guilty of not recognizing it in ourselves. The last point here is that training for where you are instead of where you want to be also helps you kind of live in the moment. And I know that's such a corny thing to say, but learning how to appreciate what you're doing right now and the climbs you're on, the climbs you're trying, man, it makes it so much better, so much more enjoyable, keeps motivation a lot higher. It's incredibly common for people to say things like, oh, well, the grades I'm at aren't that cool, but the grades 2 ahead of me, at my gym or my local crag, that's the cool spot, and that's where I want to be. And you hear this at every grade and for every area. And all this is not appreciating where you're at. Man, which is such a shame, because almost everywhere you go, like, if you can learn how to appreciate the climbs you're at, you're going to be more excited to get to them more frequently, to try hard, try them again and again, which is what you need for progress. And it's just going to keep being enjoyable coming back time and time again. Like if you're always looking to the next thing and saying, I'll be happy when I get to do that, I can tell you right now, when you get to that next level, you're still going to be looking 2 steps ahead, and you're still not going to be happy with where you're at now. Number 42, define what good progress means to you and work backwards from there. So I enjoy this concept a lot. You're an advanced climber. You're not jumping grades every year anymore, most likely. So what would be good progress? For me, man, if I increased half of a V grade every year, that'd be amazing. Let's use that as an example. Let's say you've climbed a handful of V9s, and let's say you've done like 5 of them. They've all taken you, 5 to 10 days of work, and they're all kind of in your style. I would say you're entry-level V5 climber. What a half grade increase would look like is this time next year, you can climb that same style, like your style of V9, in 1 to 4 sessions, maybe 1 to 3 sessions, and you can start doing V9s in a lot of styles. If you like facey crimp climbing, maybe a year from now you can start climbing V9s with slopers or pinches or a little more power climbing and steep climbing. Even though you haven't jumped into the V10 grade, you have improved. Now that we've defined what good progress means, so half of a V grade, let's work backwards. Let's say you climb 200 sessions a year, so roughly like 4 times a week. What that means is each session you have to improve 1/400th of a V grade. If you want to meet this, half a V grade improvement. That's not very much, right? Like 1/400th of a V grade per session. So here's the question. What can you do each day that gets you at least 1/400th? Can you show up well fueled and with good sleep? Can you give good high quality efforts where you're intentional every time you pull onto the wall? Can you make sure to try hard? Whenever you are done with your sessions, can you pause and reflect on what went well? What could I have done better? Knowing how today went, what will I do next session so that next session can improve? And also, what did I learn from today? Like, there's a lot of evidence showing that stopping and reflecting can help solidify these lessons. You can also use this time to think about what mistakes can I start to eliminate? Because if you have a session, you're like, that's felt like a 0, not even a 1/400th of an improvement. Maybe you didn't even eat enough food before the session and you didn't pack anything as a backup. That's something you can fix in the future. Maybe you had too much caffeine and you were jittery. Maybe you had put off handling a bunch of normal life responsibilities, and now you are either stressed when you're climbing or you even just had to skip a session because you didn't take care of these things earlier on. By reducing the mistakes that we're making, we can increase the quality of every session. At this point in your climbing career, progress isn't a 6-week training phase of just putting your head down and, crushing yourself. It is consistency, it is frequency, it is showing up and putting in the best work that you can, day after day, week after week, year after year. I really like this idea of picking what good progress means and working backwards. I think it also paints a more realistic picture of progress. Like, we aren't trying to jump a V grade a month. We're trying to make, 1/400th of a V grade improvement per session. Number 43, how to use different shoes to increase your performance. So you could honestly do this before being an advanced climber, but I think it's really easy to overthink climbing shoes. So I prefer to keep this in the advanced category so that you just don't have to think so hard about it. The amount of climbing shoes that you will want to have is going to vary depending on how many rock types and styles you climb in. If you only climb in one area with one rock type and one style, let's say you climb at Smith and it's technical vert climbing and that's basically it. Honestly, you could get away with like 2 pairs of shoes, a very stiff pair of shoes and a kind of stiff pair of shoes. That would end up covering most of your bases. But if you climb on a lot of rock types, a lot of styles, especially if you're a boulderer, because there's so many unique types of foot techniques for bouldering, I would say 3 tends to be a really good minimum number of shoes. Over time, climbing shoes have become much more specialized, and they've gotten a lot better at just the very specific things that they do. So there are some shoes that are incredible at grabbing and pulling and twisting on footholds in a very unique and special way. Some shoes are amazing at smearing, but terrible at other things. Some are, iconic for heel hooking. And while you don't need the perfect heel hooking shoe for every heel hook, it's worth having a shoe that you can say, this shoe heel hooks really well. If it does other things well too, awesome, that's great. But you need to make sure you have the right tools for the job, and climbing shoes are specialized enough at this point that there's not a great reason to not have a couple for different tasks. Another thing too is climbing shoes don't expire, really. Like rubber goes bad over a very long time because it oxidizes. But if you have one pair of shoes that you wear for absolutely everything, it's going to wear out pretty quickly. Versus if you have a couple pairs of shoes that you cycle in and out for different reasons, that wear is going to be spread out across all the shoes. It's not like one pair of shoes will last me 5 months and then 3 pairs of shoes will also last me 5 months. It ends up spreading out the wear, so it also kind of spreads out the cost difference. Obviously, it is more of an upfront cost, but if you're going to end up buying the shoes anyways, over time, it's not really that much of a difference. Now you might be saying, Nate, I just want to use one pair of shoes. I don't want to have to have a bunch of different specialized shoes. And also, if I'm paying $220 for a pair of shoes, I would hope it could do everything. And unfortunately, that is just a big myth in climbing shoes. And there's a lot of climbing shoe myths. But one of the biggest ones now is that a good shoe should be able to do everything. Should be able to smear, climb slabs, climb vert, steep overhang, step in pockets, toe hook, heel hook, jam, all the things. And that's not going to happen. The shoe that can do all of those things honestly would be pretty terrible. Because then it would just be good at absolutely nothing. Maybe 30 years ago, there would be 1 or 2 shoes where you would say, yeah, this shoe is good at just about everything. But frankly, shoes 30 years ago just weren't that good. And so it was more like, this shoe is the least terrible at all the things, so I'm going to use it. We're beyond that. That is not how climbing shoes work anymore, thankfully. I do have 2 caveats for this. First, is if you are a competition climber, then yeah, only having probably 2 pairs of shoes, a stiff shoe and a soft pair, makes a lot of sense. In most competitions, you're not going to have time to swap through a bunch of different shoes, make different choices. So what ends up needing to happen is you really just need to get very good at everything with one shoe. So you're going to make a compromise and say, okay, I'm going to wear these Dragos because I can step on volumes really well. They're not the best at tiny little edges, but I can train in them enough that I can get good enough on that, because across the totality of competition boulders that I face, Dragos will help me more than anything else. And even then, yeah, maybe throw some VSRs in for small edges occasionally, but it's not worth having 5 different pairs of shoes as a competition climber rather than just really mastering one pair of shoes. The other caveat, and this one's kind of half and half, is for sport climbers. You could make the argument that wearing one pair of shoes gets you really good at knowing all the capabilities, the ups and downs of this pair of shoes. And so because you can't change shoes midway on a route, on most routes, it really pays off to be very good with one type of shoe. Yeah, I'll concede to that. And I do think sport climbers tend to use less shoes than boulderers, but there's still some trade-off there. And I would still argue that, honestly, probably 2-3 pairs of shoes for sport climbers, still super beneficial. Thanks for joining along on this last episode. If there are any points in particular that you thought were interesting and you'd like to see a full video on, let me know. If there are any points where you thought, maybe I was wrong, maybe I am overthinking things or underthinking things, let me know. I'd love to hear that. I've been really appreciating y'all's input and all the dialogue that we've been having in the comments section, so please keep that going. I really enjoy it, and I appreciate y'all contributing to this channel in that way. Thanks for following along, and I'll see you next time.